Preseason game number 3 comes down to close the preseason. Who's got a chance and who takes advantage today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Right now is a great time to find Gametime. This episode is brought to you by them. Download the Gametime app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and you're going to get $20 off of your first ticket purchase right now. Terms apply. You might even use it for this Bears game, but you can get into the action over there. Chris Clark is here to tell you about the quarterbacks, tell you about the cap, and the things that I don't know. I appreciate that. I'm Ryan Tracy, founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football. And I'll go into technique, film, the whole 9 yards. We're going to cover this team 360, and today we're going to get you ready for the final preseason game. Thanks for making us your first listen here on Locked On Podcast Network. Make another NFL show, another Locked On NFL show, your next listen, because we have every team covered, the league across the board, and even fantasy football. Make sure that you check all of that out. And then get onto the Spotify and the podcast. Get here on YouTube, like, sub, and hit it all. We have all that and more for you. And then we have the Insiders text line. That's where the locos hang out. We appreciate you guys. 816-357-8781. Not my phone number, the text line. That's what we're getting at. So join us, and I appreciate you guys checking it out. Today, roster balance is what's going to come into play for these cutdowns. We have a good long time for these cutdowns. And if you heard some theories yesterday with Matt Derrick, if you didn't, go back and check that out yesterday. Don't miss our post-game live after this Bears preseason finale, and we'll start looking at specific ideas about roster balance today coming up later in the show. We're going to give you an in and out on final chances. That'll be next, and we'll start about what this game means. What do you got?
I was just going to say, one of the things that you mentioned yesterday on talking with Matt is don't expect Kansas City to make a move, a ton of moves, at least maybe Friday. I would expect that this is something that's going to drag out, and they're probably going to wait until Tuesday, and we'll be scrambling as usual because that's generally how they do it.
It is. You might get a straight cut. Like if there's a vet that they know that they're not going to keep, they might let him out early so they can go.
And they should
get out there. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, the volume of it is probably not going to come down until they're very close, because the last thing you want to do is drop somebody, especially if there's anticipation of picking up another player based on maybe this week's performance around the league, and then not be able to get them and leave yourself short in any way. That's what this preseason game number 3 really means. We won't see Mahomes. We won't see the starters. But like almost every other team around the league, you're going to see the quality backups first and the depth players after that. And you may be able to pick something up, especially for the bottom half of your roster, that you don't have right now. There are a number of things here, but it means for the guys on this roster trying to make it, this is their opportunity. I don't know how many spots are available right now. There could be 2, there could be 6. I don't know. But the number one thing that I do know is whether it's for the Kansas City Chiefs or another team, you got to show out if you're a guy on the razor's edge in this game.
Yep. And one of the things that I think that you look at, and just really quick, they did make a move today. They released Jaron Hayek. I think it's Jaron. With an injury settlement or with an injury designation, so he could probably come back to IR. They may end up having a settlement, but I don't expect them to make a move because obviously day before game, no real reason at this point. So there's one of your cuts already. When it comes to how many roster spots are available, I think you look at it and it's a question of, okay, it makes a ton of sense that you're going to have maybe 5 roster spots that you don't know who you're going to keep yet. You probably have a pretty good idea of where people are on the depth chart and where you like them. But then it becomes a question as to roster balance. And we'll talk about that later. But that's a big key is to when we start looking at the ins and outs and what this means for some of these players, it's a question of we know where they are on the depth chart, but can they force them to make a move to keep them based on their position and based on what they do in the game? Because that's going to play into it.
And there's fine lines between a lot of these guys. There's clusters right at the edge of making a roster spot, right? We're going to talk about wide receivers. We're going to talk about corners, but there's some guys in the trenches as well where it's not just your value on this roster, but it's also the value of what somebody else's roster might need. There are guys on this cut that will play on other rosters in this league, and that's part of the math that has to go in it. So make the most of your opportunity. It might just get you saved onto this roster so that you don't get picked up by somebody else. That is part of the equation. And I think if I was preaching to this locker room tonight is take all the information you have, commit it to memory, but throw it out the window. You can't afford to think in this game. If you're a guy trying to make this roster, you got to play fast and you got to play instinctive.
I was about to just say that exact thing. You cannot.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot get into this game and just think. Like, you cannot let thinking slow you down. If you make a mistake because you read something wrong and it happens, but you have to be as instinctual as you possibly can in this game because everything is going to matter in every single snap in this game. And you're right. If you're on the razor's edge, this is a situation where they're either going to make it or they're not. And maybe, they do something and maybe they don't make the roster, but they make them think, okay, well, I want this guy in the practice squad. I want to bring him back for the practice squad. That's possible too.
Yeah. Anything is possible. People, unfortunately, around the league, hopefully not in this game for the Chiefs, but people do get hurt in the last preseason game. And it changes fortunes, both good and bad. So you have to watch out for that. The key is for this ball game is to be ready to go and take the most advantage you can of any opportunity you're given. There's a lot of guys that are going to do that. We're going to talk about some of them right after this in and out. Getting your tickets to Arrowhead just got easier. Whether you're looking for that week 1 against the Ravens, week 2 against the Bengals, or even week 5 when they come back in October for the New Orleans Saints, they have a new feature at Gametime called Gametime Picks. And it takes all the guesswork out of getting your tickets. It makes it easier to filter out the fluff and get the incredible deals on seats that you don't want to waste time searching for through those thousands of tickets. Get Gametime Picks. The curation makes it easy to get all the sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, anything that you're looking for. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off of your first ticket purchase at Gametime. It's last-minute tickets. It is lowest prices, and it's always guaranteed. If you want guaranteed help with your fantasy draft, make sure you check out Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Iyer. He's getting you ready for your draft right now on his show here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your team every day. Thanks for being with us. Make sure you like and sub and check out Chiefs Corner for Chris's work, NFL 33 for mine, and RGR Football as well. A lot of decisions going into this, and I think there are a couple of final chances for guys trying to make this roster that are going to have that opportunity against the Bears. So let's go in or out, buying or selling. I can start you off. He's going to get some kick returns. I think he might even get to kick, but it's very, very close because I think the running back room is probably thinner than we think, but the Chiefs have a tendency to be loyal. So my question to you, Louis Rees-Zammit, can he do anything tomorrow night to get onto this roster, in or out, that he makes that change?
I'm going to caveat it with it really depends on what they do with Clyde and how they go to other positions. I think that it's possible. A return touchdown would give him maybe a possibility to stick on this roster. And I will say this too. I do think if he was able to show that he can be a viable returner, I do think that matters a lot more, because I also think that they possibly would want to use him on kickoffs specifically, because I don't think they want Butker out there. This whole new kickoff rule with how they're going to do kickoffs and do different things, I think that they would like to be able to have somebody else do the kicks. Yes, I know Justin Reed could do it too, but he hasn't been healthy all offseason. Do you really want to put him out there doing the same thing and another starter? He's one of the ones that you're paying $15 million, I think, +2 this year. So could he do enough? Yes. I'm not expecting it, though. I do think that it's you have some other roster positions that are going to make it really hard for him to make this.
Fair enough. That it's pretty much, I think, a long shot at this point. I am looking forward to a year spent on the practice squad where, should he make some miraculous development, he can be elevated ahead of time, and I'll feel very good about that. The question is, just don't do anything stupid and show yourself off so much, so that you can't get onto the practice squad. That's the big problem for me. Waiver claims are a bear.
Yeah. No, that's going to be a big question when it comes to him. But they were the only team that really, I think, gave him an offer this offseason. So I think that plays into it as well. In or out, Christian Roland Wallace has a chance to make this roster.
Absolutely in. And my question is going to be, how much does he play? Because I don't expect Trent McDuffie, right? I don't think Najee Johnson should play given his injury. Jalen Watson is going to get time because they need to get him some reps. I expect Christian Wallace to be out there with Jalen Watson. And if he plays a quarter and he's out, I think we know the answer to that question. So I'm leaning towards he is on this roster. As I said the other day in our prediction, if you missed that, it was back on Tuesday. I have him making it, and I am all the way in.
Yeah, I have him making it as well. And the big question I have is, where is he going to play? That is, I think, going to be a big key to me. Do they have him continue in the slot like they have had him? Are they going to play him outside any? Are they going to give him any safety reps? What does he do? That's my curiosity on that one.
Makes perfect sense to me. There's a lot of questions about how they're going to get some pass rush as well. This isn't about a specific player because I'm betting with Truman Jones a little bit banged up this week. We know most of the statuses of everyone else. It's just slim pickings. So it's not about what happens in this game, but given that nothing outlandish happens and nobody walks in and becomes, the next whirling dervish or anything like that, my question to you is, do the Chiefs make an acquisition at the edge rusher position at cut downs, in or out?
I'm going to go in. I think that they could be looking for an edge. And you brought up Truman Jones, so I just want to say mystery IR designation potential.
Yeah, all over.
That's the way I look at that one.
Yeah, I have a tendency to think so too. It depends what happens. I don't think there's anybody coming to Kansas City that is on their 7th team or something like that. Yeah, I don't think there's a Randy Gregory in the Chiefs' future. I could be wrong. They have made exceptions before, but I think that particular guy who I've gotten a lot of questions about, I think it's run its course for the most part. I don't think he's in Kansas City, but there could be other guys that get cut. Arden Key's had a rough preseason. There are a number of other pass rushers that might be stacked a little too deep, and maybe the Chiefs, despite being the 32nd waiver claim, they might be able to pick somebody up they think has potential.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say in that, and the caveat is, I also think it's possible they make a trade because of the 32nd team, and because it could be somebody that maybe has a little bit more money than you would expect to be hitting in more of a veteran type player. I think that they could, a conditional 6th or 7th to go get a guy that is going to get cut might make sense.
Yeah,
because then they don't have to compete against anybody. Sorry.
Absolutely. And you can see the problem right now is we're projecting that 6th and 7th round picks in this draft class are unlikely to make it to the roster. So giving that away, especially now after you've got solid camp film on somebody, makes a lot of sense. And I think has less inherent risk than holding on to that draft pick and waiting till the 7th round next year.
Well, and it may be 2025 or 2026 for all we know. Who knows what they're going to be trading away, getting those conditional picks. So I do think that that's a move that they could possibly make.
Yeah. I think
in or out.
Right.
Chiefs keep 7 wide receivers.
This is all about Hollywood's injury. If they feel he's a week or two away and they're just going to ride it out on the roster, then they may absolutely do that, especially given that they're in that situation again where there's a lot of ifs there. My gut says it's probably not that. Either he's going to be good to go week 1 or he's going to need 3 weeks is my gut. So I think they just keep 6. That's where I'm at right now.
Yep. I'm at the same place. And I think that when you look at it, it's just a question of the rest of the roster. And I said this when you asked me about LRZ. What they do with CEH is going to matter. And that's a big question right now, because if they keep him, then you're keeping probably 4 running backs, because I can't see them releasing. They're not going to get rid of Steele, and I don't see them releasing to Eric Prince either. So I can't imagine that you're going to keep 4 running backs and 7 wide receivers. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. I just don't see it.
It is tough. That crystal ball is getting foggier here as we get closer to cut down day. Last one for me. I am really intrigued as to the battle that doesn't include Miles Battle to get onto the roster at corner. We already talked about CRW, but the Chiefs love their long corners. There's 4 guys in one draft class that are going to be the top 4 corners on this team. That's not a question to me. That is the ranking. But you got to start looking ahead. You're going to pay Trent McDuffie, and even if you kept them intact, you can't pay them all the same year. You're going to run into all kinds of things. So you got to mix it up a little. So if CRW is out of the conversation and we feel confident about him, what's the next long, tall corner that makes it? Is it Kelvin Joseph? Is it Keith Taylor? Is it Eko Boydo, who's played some special team snaps for this, knowing that you're going to play that as a 6th corner anyway? Who stands out to you, in or out? I'm leaning towards Joseph. In or out, do you agree?
I'm in. And I think the reason I'm in at this point is because I don't think, while I agree with you, you can't pay him all at once. Trent McDuffie will be getting his 5th-year option picked up, so that's not going to be an issue. He will be here another 2 years. They could pay him. I expect them to try to pay him next year, along with paying Karlaftis. That's a whole nother discussion that we'll get into at a later point. But when you start looking at a guy like Williams and a guy like Jalen Watson, you want somebody to be able to step in and play. And the problem with some of those other guys like Eko Boydo, are you really going to feel comfortable knowing that you're headed into the season with guys that have been injured? Williams came up injured the other day. Johnson is injured. Johnson has been injured. Watson has been injured. You're dealing with all these different corner injuries. Are you going to want to go with somebody that is youthful to try to keep them for future years, or are you going to try to go with somebody that you think can step in and play this year if the worst happens and all 3 of those guys go down with injuries?
It's a tough call, and this is one battle I think might be hanging in the balance right now before we go to see the Bears, and that could change things. And if that changes, so does the whole math of this roster. How do they balance it out? You got to lean, I think, if you're the Chiefs, towards what the upside is 6, 8, 10, 18 weeks from now. That's where we're going next on roster balance when we get back. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now they have a chance for you to do exactly what I do every single week. They have something a little bit different for you right now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube base plan account, all you got to do is watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. No problem. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's not about juggling, but it is a tight wire. And if you want to get into the details of what these decisions are, it's not just about how roster positions are stacked. I think those are pretty much set for right now. What I have to figure out is, depending on partially tomorrow's performances, say Keith Taylor goes off and he makes you think, you know what, I got to have 6 corners. I probably already have 4 safeties. Does that mean that I can't have a 10th offensive lineman, or does it mean I can't have a 7th wide receiver? It's those decisions that are hanging in the balance right now. And I think for me, given the rate of injury and the position group itself, I think I would have to keep a corner over a 7th wide receiver, given that they're banged up at CB right now. Would you agree with that, or how would you go about it?
So let's just do quick roster math here. I'm thinking they're going to keep 5 defensive tackles. I think that they're going to probably keep 5 defensive ends and 5 linebackers. That puts them at 15. I'm guessing that they keep 6 CBs and 4 safeties. That puts them at 25. That would be your defense. Offensively, I'm guessing 2 QBs, 3 running backs, maybe 4. 3 tight ends, 6 wide receivers, and whatever's left on the offensive line, maybe 9 or 10. So what it really comes down to for me is, I think you have a pretty good idea of who your top 5 corners are. So the question is going to be, if a guy like Christian Roland Wallace is corner number 6, I think that if they think he can play, I think that he forces his way onto the roster as number 6. But you make an interesting question when it comes to a guy like Keith Taylor. Taylor's a guy that you would think would be somebody that would step in and play more right now, and that would be almost corner number 7 for me. So in that scenario, you're sitting there looking at something where maybe you have to keep 7 corners and you go short somewhere else. And to be clear, I know we've talked about this a ton, but I want to be clear on this. We both have Connor as a safety, so not counting him in that corner mix right now. That's one of our 4 safeties.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's a lock that they keep for, since I'm stacking him that way. If they call him a corner, okay, they can just keep 3, but that's fine. But then you get into, if you're going to go 7 corners, that means you're losing an offensive lineman. You're definitely not keeping a 7th wide receiver. And unless the math works out, you're probably not keeping 4 tight ends either. And that's again where the tight end group is pretty solid. No outstanding injuries right now. I think you know who the top 3 performers is. I would wager that Irv Smith, the balance of keeping him versus keeping a Keith Taylor. Sorry, I messed up your name, buddy. It just weighs too heavily towards the cornerback group again.
Yeah, no, it really does. And we talked about this early in the offseason, and we haven't really talked about it much since. But the other side of it is when you start looking at offensive line, defensive line, those types of positions where you're keeping 8, 9 people, 10 people, maybe even at some of those, when you start getting into the nitty gritty of it, the question becomes, are you going to keep 10 or are you going to keep maybe a 6th linebacker? Is that something that they want to do for special teams purposes? Because that's another thing that you have to be watching out for and looking out for in this case. And one of the things that goes back to what we talked about right after the second preseason game with Carson Steele is, what do they see his role as? Does his role change what they look at other positions? Because maybe they thought they were going to have to keep 6 linebackers, but with Carson Steele, his size and his speed and his ability to play on special teams, do they think that maybe they can get away with not having a 6th linebacker to play in that type of role? You know what I mean? I mean, it all comes down to, how are you going to put this roster together to be the best that it could possibly be? And when you start looking at the, corners versus wide receivers, those aren't needed near as much anymore. When you start talking about gunners, that changes your needs as well.
I think I'm settling on Sunshine Crocodile is his new nickname for me. But I'm glad that you bring him up, because I'm going to argue that his role isn't that important, because I have him as the number 2 running back now. I don't see him playing special teams on every unit. I know he can, but right now, if you had to wheel him out of the 4 running backs you got, I'm putting him out there second. It's not a question to me.
I know you will. I don't know that they will. We'll see. I think it was really important for them to figure out what he has the ability to do. And I do think that they will have him out there on special teams, even if he is the second running back, because you are in a situation where you have a limited supply of players that you can do certain things with. And one of the big things that we haven't talked about at all, go look at last year. One of McKinnon's biggest jobs, and I would argue that he was mostly running back 2 last year. One of his biggest jobs was personal protector of the punter. That's a huge responsibility, and Carson Steele, I think, is built just about perfectly for that position. So, I could see him on that. I could see him on kickoffs. I mean, it just really depends. And he gives them the ability to have somebody that could go back and return if they absolutely needed it as well.
Yeah, I think he showed a little bit of that. I'll be real interested to see if he gets another crack at the return game in this contest against the Bears.
I'm interested to see how much he plays.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if he's out there for a couple of drives and we don't see him anymore, that the Chiefs are thinking this along the lines that I am, that he's got to be able and available to be a backup or to be at least a 3rd down guy. I think his protection has warranted that ahead of both Clyde and Deneric Prince, in my opinion.
Yep. Agreed. No, and I think that he gives them the ability to do fullback counters, and I know he's not a really a fullback, but he gives them the ability to run some of those types of things that they've done in the past, and that could be a lot of fun for Andy Reid, and it could change what they're going to do on offense. And let's be honest, I am even a little excited about having Carson Steele lead blocking for Pacheco. I think that would be a lot of fun to see on the field.
Well, and I think the thing that we've been missing lately is when they go into split backs, You know they're trying to hit the edges because McKinnon was usually one of them, and it was a particular play group design. Right now, you have no way to do that. You can run lead power out of split backs with Pacheco and Strong, and you don't know who's going to get the ball. I think that's the other beauty of it is
you mean steal, but yes.
being able to hide what you're doing. Yeah. The last thing that I think is crucially important, and I hinted at this earlier in the show, but it was hard for me to set the offensive line. Not necessarily because I think anybody's outplayed a practice squad position, but because I think two guys in particular, in Hansen and Driscoll, have played well enough on film around the league that pro personnel departments, the other 31 are like, just cut them and we'll bring them in, because I think they're kind of itching to get their hands on those guys. They might have to be kept just to protect them from getting picked up on waivers.
When you look at Driscoll and you look at a guy like CJ Hansen, you're looking at situations where you have to look at skill set, you have to look at where they are right now, but you also have to look at what they bring to the table that maybe you can't find elsewhere. And I think that's exactly what they have in a guy like Driscoll. Look at what he did with on that Prince run around the corner in the last game. I mean, that was a huge play where he's running 30 yards down the field, blocking out in front of Prince. There are not many linemen in the NFL that can do that, not with that type of speed. Like, they can try to get out there and they will try, but they don't have the nimbleness of foot to be able to do that. I mean, go back a couple of years and watch what they had with Orlando Brown. It was a completely different type of situation there. So something to watch. I do think that Driscoll's a guy that could possibly be looked at to be picked up, because you look at that specific play in general and you consider the fact that, go back and look at the NCAA. They can't produce great offensive linemen on a regular basis. That's one of the reasons why teams struggle in the NFL, is because they can't get to a point where they have 6, 7, 8 guys that they trust to be, players that they can use. Look at what happened with Allegretti and what happened with Wiley. Both of those guys got deals elsewhere, and big money deals, or at least bigger money deals than you're going to get. If you're a backup, they were both slated to start for teams. So I do think that there's a lot of value there. I think that Driscoll and Hansen could be looked at by other teams. I didn't see a ton from Hansen. I do think that he showed that he could play all 3 positions, which is important. So maybe there's something there. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they would consider doing something. But honestly, when it comes to Driscoll, for me, I think he has. If you get down to a situation, and I guess let me ask you a quick question, and then I want to finish on one quick thought on this. But my quick question to you is, if you get down to a situation where you have to play your 4th tackle, which I think would be Niang if they're going to keep him, is there going to be a huge drop-off in your mind between him and Driscoll? I mean, you're going to have a drop-off for sure, but there isn't going to be something that Niang can do that Driscoll can. It's a technique issue that Driscoll's going to have to work on.
Yeah, I mean, there are the finer points. I mean, especially once in contact, right? How you adjust to a pass rusher's plan and the jolt of somebody who can deliver you a long arm or that kind of thing. There is a sizable drop off. But I think that's counteracted by the raw athleticism that Driscoll has that clearly Niang doesn't at this point. And I do think the Chiefs would probably, absolutely, they would rely on the experience. They always lean on experience in that situation. I do think the drop off is there, but I would argue that Driscoll's probably as functional as Godric is at this point. So I don't think if you're taking a risk, if it's that much risk to take, is my point. Certainly after things calm down, you can probably do another rigmarole to get him onto the practice squad.
Well, but to me, I think that you're looking at a situation where Niang's not going to be picked up by anybody, I don't believe. I think you could bring him back to the practice squad if you wanted to. Driscoll, for me, is a guy that I don't know, just because of the way he's able to move. Yes, his technique might not be there, but another team could pick him up and have him on their bench for the next 2 years and have him start in 3 years. There's length there, there's agility there, there's speed there, his ability, his long arms. I mean, just his entire frame is something you cannot find, generally speaking, in today's NFL. And I'm not trying to compare him to Joe Alt, because I know he's not Joe Alt, but he's the same size. Alt's 6'8", right? So you're talking about two guys that are similar in size and stature in that regard. That's the type of player that's the type of body type that he has, and that's rare. So I think there's more value there than keeping a guy like Niang, because if you're down to your fourth offensive tackle anyway, you're going to be hurting, and maybe you're looking at somebody else moving out there. Maybe you would put Norzad in that situation as opposed to putting in a guy like Niang. Or, sorry, in Driscoll, I guess.
Could be. I mean, and you have to remember that this is a team that, we watched Eric Fisher be an athletic but under technique, under physical lineman that had to grow into it. They spent a first-round pick on that. Obviously, different time, different decision makers. But now you're talking about an undrafted free agent that all you got to do is find a way to keep him, and you can try to make that same progression. Who knows if it could turn out to be the same thing? All the physical elements are there. It's just about that training, and that takes time. So I don't know that I'd play him. I got to tell you, I'd probably just leave the film the way it is and try to hide him at this point is what I would do. But what would you guys do? That's what we need to know. Do you think that there is a change here? What is the roster balance? What is the primary position that needs to be bolstered? Maybe at the disrespect to some others, depending on how these final arguments and tests come out. Let us know down in the comments below on YouTube. Make sure you're liked and subbed, and you are here with us. We are going to be live post-game, as we always are, a little bit delayed after Matt Derrick joins us post-presser. So we will have all the information and the breakdown from there, and then we will start breaking down the moves that should and think we could see be made as we get down and ready for cutdowns. So don't miss a thing. Sub here. Like here on YouTube. Make sure you're subbed on the audio platforms. Thanks for being with us. It's always a fun day in Chiefs Kingdom, especially when it's game day. So welcome to it. Let's see how the preseason wraps up. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you live post-game.